weird friends of the interwebs, I'm Alexa, the resident ooky spooky girly, and today I'm ready to talk about time travel slips. None of these stories are my own today because sadly, I haven't been able to find a time machine to borrow yet. I've predicted the future a few times, but it's always weird and not the good kind. Question for y'all, have you ever had time like warp for you? And I don't mean in a Rocky Horror kind of way. Let me know, and here are the top 5 bizarre time slip experiences experts can't explain. In 5th place, we have a case from Liverpool. I have a feeling this is the most popular case there is, so feel free to let me know in the comments if I'm right. On a sunny day in July of 1996, an off-duty policeman called Frank when shopping with his wife Carol in Liverpool city centre. Carol went off to buy a copy of Irvine Welsh's Trainspotting at Dylan's bookshop on Bolt Street, while Frank went to purchase a CD at HMV on Ranelagh Street. I still very much collect physical media. I've actually run out of room on my living room bookshelf for my always growing VHS and CD collection. Sorry, I know. Back on topic I go. So, our narrator bumped into a friend, had a chat, and then about 20 minutes later, he strolled over to Bolt Street to meet his wife. And upon strolling up the incline from the central station, he noticed an unusual quietness. Frank observed that the street was cobbled where it had never been before, and instead of modern clothes, people wore clothes from the 1950s. He was startled by a loud horn, and a box van with the name Kaplan's on its side sped past, just missing him. Crossing the road, Frank saw that instead of Dylan's bookshop, there was a large store with the name Cripps over its 2 entrances, with a window display containing women's handbags and shoes. Frank saw another person, a young woman, dressed in the clothes of the mid-90s, wearing, hipster jeans and a lime green sleeveless top. Big change from what I'm assuming were a million dresses and long skirts. She also carried a bag branded with Miss Selfridge, a store that was not in Liverpool in the 1950s. This modern girl entered Cripps looking baffled, and suddenly the whole street scene reverted back to 1996. Frank asked the young woman if she saw the same things he'd seen. She said she had and seemed frightened. Later, it was confirmed that a woman's outfitters called Cripps had indeed stood on the site of Dylan's in the 1950s. We know the month and year, the first names of the 2 people, the names on the signs, and exactly what book Carol was going to buy. It doesn't appear that either Frank or Carol ever spoke to anyone about this incident. And you know what? I don't really blame them. This is the kind of story that would get you shunned in the wrong kind of company. In 4th place, we have a very confused driver. So back in 1969, a man who prefers to go by LC for anonymity's sake and his business associate Bob were driving along Highway 167 towards the oil center city of Lafayette after finishing lunch in the southwest Louisiana town of Abbeville, United States. It was the 20th of October and around 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon when they spotted an old turtleback car going really slow. They were intrigued by the vehicle because it wasn't something either of them had seen before. I had to look it up myself because I am honestly the most vehicle unaware person to exist. Honest to goodness, I exasperated the heck out of my dad growing up. Actually, never mind growing up, I still do. He can go on and on and on about car makes, models, all the specifics, and I just sit there with no thoughts in my brain. For what it's worth, the vehicle in question would very much stand out, and it's definitely an antique. But here's the kicker. Are you ready? Even though the vehicle looked like a blast from the past, it was in mid-condition. The 2 men overtook the vehicle, but not before slowing down right next to it to check it out in detail. The car had a very distinct, large, bright orange license plate with the year 1940 clearly printed on it, which was quite odd because antique cars weren't allowed to be driven on the road at the time unless they were being used for a ceremonial parade, which I had to look that up to be sure, but yep, it makes sense to me for safety reasons, and things just got weirder from there. The person driving the car was a young woman dressed in a 1940s dress, complete with a hat and fur coat. She was accompanied by a small boy who was also dressed in a heavy coat and a cap. As the men pulled up next to the car, the lady started panicking, frantically looking back and forth as if she was in the middle of somewhere unknown. Elsie asked her if she needed any help, to which she responded in the affirmative. But at no point did she roll down the window or even look him in the eye. After asking her several times to, stop the car, the guys finally saw her pull over on the side of the road. Elsie and Bob passed her and pulled over in front of her, but as soon as they looked behind them, the woman's vehicle was gone, as if it had completely vanished into thin air. So this was a highway without any traffic. So disappearing like this was impossible. Shocked and not knowing how to describe what had just happened, Elsie and Bob decided to keep on driving on. A little while later, while they were still on Highway 167, they saw another new car pass a very old car at a really slow speed. It was apparently so slow that it looked like the cars had come to a halt. As soon as the new car pulled over in front of the old car, the same thing happened. Stopped and then suddenly disappeared. The guys couldn't believe their eyes. Even the guy in the other car was completely shocked. The 3 started describing what each had seen while walking around the area in hopes of finding, some sort of evidence. The 3rd guy insisted they should be reporting this to the police, as this, according to him, was a missing persons case. Elsie and Bob refused, more so because they had no idea where the woman and the boy, along with the car, had vanished. They never saw the vehicle again, so I hope that lady and her ward found their way home. In third place, we have A Tale from a Pilot. Now, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times, but I place a lot of belief and trust in experiences that come from pilots, since they are legitimately trained to recognize the unknown in the air and remember everything about what they see. My ADHD brain could never remember, that much unless it's a hyperfixation. And even then, I wouldn't trust it to remember anything on command when I'm overwhelmed. So back in 1935, when he was a wing commander, Sir Victor Goddard was instructed to inspect an inactive airbase located in Drem, near Edinburgh in Scotland. While flying over it, Sir Goddard found the airbase to be in a poor state, with cattle grazing on the wild grass that had now forced its way through the tarmac. The entire place was in complete shambles. Later on, while flying his plane, he got into a bit of trouble thanks to the harsh weather conditions, and to avoid an accident, he decided to fly back to the abandoned airbase till the weather cleared out a bit. As he approached the airbase, the torrential rain oddly and very abruptly gave way to bright sunshine. And then Sir Victor noticed that the airbase was not only in mint condition, but in use. He spotted mechanics wearing blue overalls working on the yellow planes parked on the runway, but was unable to recognize a single aircraft on the base. There was no way the place could have gone from decrepit to fully renovated and operational in half an afternoon. And more importantly, these guys weren't wearing the khaki-colored uniforms that were a norm at the time. Also, the Air Force painted all their planes in silver, not yellow. Completely baffled by what on earth was going on, Sir Goddard got the shock of his life 4 years after. Europe was war-torn, and he happened to visit Drem again. This time he saw everything he saw 4 years back in 1935. The same people in blue overalls servicing yellow planes, and even found the plane he couldn't recognize before, now identifying it as a Miles Magister. I've had a glimpse into the future before myself, like I mentioned earlier, but never anything that detailed. Thank goodness he didn't go mad from it. In second place, time to visit Leeds Castle. This is the tale of Alice Pollock, who was born into minor aristocracy, and this allowed her entry to Leeds Castle in a time when it was not generally open to the public. For reference, Leeds Castle is a famous and picturesque castle not far from London, England. Alice Pollock was psychic, and she was trying out some psychometry in Henry VIII's old room. For reference, psychometry is a technique where a psychic will touch an object and learn about its history from the impressions they pick up. So, touching various objects in Leeds Castle propelled Alice back into the past. The castle changed, it became cold and bare, the carpet below her vanished, and there was a blazing fire piled with logs. Alice saw a tall woman pacing back and forth in the room, apparently lost in concentration, but in an instant, all returned to normal. Later research informed Alice that the room in which she had the vision had been the prison room of Joan of Navarre. So Joan of Navarre was Henry V's stepmother, who was imprisoned after being accused of plotting against the king. She was found innocent and thankfully was eventually released, but it explains why she'd be pacing in concentration. In first place, we're traveling back to Versailles. The year was 1901, and a pair of friends, 55-year-old Anne Moberly and 38-year-old Eleanor Jourdain, to be precise, were on holiday in France. They were both teachers at St. Hugh's College in Oxford, and had set out to see the vast palace of Versailles, the center of political power in France until the French Revolution in 1789. They turned to visit Le Petit Trianon, a small chateau on the grounds given to Marie Antoinette as a private retreat for her personal use. The ladies got a little bit lost searching for the chateau, and it was during this interlude that they made history, even if only in some small way. They encountered several people in 1979 period attire, carrying out period activities, and passed a handful of structures that had not existed since 1789. Their unexpected visit to 112 years in the past culminated with an encounter with Marie Antoinette herself, sketching on the grounds of her chateau. Ms. Jourdain wrote later that everything suddenly looked unnatural and unpleasant. Even the trees seemed to become flat and lifeless, like wood worked in tapestry. There were no effects of light and shade, and no wind stirred the trees. They reached the edge of a wood, close to the Temple de l'Amour, and came across a man seated beside a garden kiosk, wearing a cloak and a large shady hat. According to Moberly, his appearance was most repulsive, and Jourdain noted that the man slowly turned his face, which was marked by smallpox, and observed that its complexion was very dark. The expression was evil and yet unseeing, and though she did not feel that he was looking particularly at them, she felt a repugnance to going past him. A man that was later described as tall, with large dark eyes and crisp curling black hair under a large sombrero hat, came up to them and showed them the way to Le Petit Trianon. After crossing a bridge, they reached the gardens in front of the palace, and Moberly noticed a lady sketching on the grass who looked at them. She later described what she saw in great detail. The lady was wearing a light summer dress, on her head was a shady white hat, and she had lots of fair hair. Okay, my hair's dark, but you get the idea. Moberly thought she was a tourist at first, but the dress appeared to be old-fashioned, and that's when it dawned on her that this was Marie Antoinette herself. After this, they were directed around to the entrance and joined a party of other visitors. The strange feelings and visions of the past had vanished, and it was many months before the woman told of their strange encounters. Visiting Versailles sometime later, the women were not able to find the landmarks that they had noticed during the incident. During their research, they thought they recognized the man by the kiosks as the Comte de Vaudreuil, a friend of Marie Antoinette, who herself had been thought to have been seen by Moberly. Within months, they published their account in a book called An Adventure, later published as The Ghosts of Trianon, and as they were both respected academics who did not desire bizarre publicity, they published it under pseudonyms. See, this is what solidified the validity of this tale for me. The woman just wanted the truth out there without the fame. Their experience became variously known as the Versailles time slip, the Ghost of Trianon, or the Montberly-Jourdain incident, and it has intrigued researchers, historians, and enthusiasts of the paranormal ever since. No one has been able to explain what the woman saw. Both women are reported to have had many paranormal experiences before and after their adventure. In one of them, Montberly claimed to have seen in the Louvre in 1914 an apparition of the Roman Emperor Constantine, a man of unusual height wearing a gold crown and a toga, and he was not observed by anybody else. During the First World War, Jourdain, the dominant personality of the pair, and who had become principal of St. Hugh, became convinced that a German spy was hiding in the college. I believe both of these women had abilities that most of us don't tap into, and just wanted answers. And that brings us to the end of our time, and while I'm no expert, I don't have any kind of explanation other than what's been presented to us today. I'm just glad I live in the timeline I do, even with my love of retro fashion and media. If you enjoyed my sleep-deprived ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribe if you aren't already, and hit the bell for more bizarro content from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people. Wearing a gold... no worries. I made a and this allowed her entry to Leeds Castle in a time when it was not generally open to the public. Gosh, can we go back a minute? That phrase. There we go. This is the tale of